Welcome to this video lecture about scientific research in information systems. This video lecture in particular is about research design. We will cover the topic of research questions and their role in research design, in specifically common problems that one can encounter with research questions, the difference between type 1 and type 2 research questions, and characteristics of high quality research questions that students can reflect upon once they specified their research question. The main reading for this video lecture is Chapter 3, Planning your Research, from the book Scientific Research in Information Systems, a Beginner's Guide, available in its second edition by Springer in 2021. The book is available as a hard copy, soft copy, an ebook, or even audiobook. And most university libraries have access to electronic files of each chapter. An electronic copy of this chapter, for example, is available via Springer link under the URL provided. Research questions. Research questions specify the problem a study sets out to solve. And they're very important. In fact, most people would say that the choice of a research problem is the most important decision one makes as a researcher, because the research questions specify a problem that a researcher will invest their next time and resources in answering. It is also a very difficult thing to learn, how to specify a good research question. One can lead research methods, different ways of collecting data and analyzing data. That can be taught through courses such as this one. One can also learn theory building skills and building better explanations. We can learn how to analyze scientific data better. We can learn how to write better. And it is also possible to come up with quite a large number of research questions. That does not mean that the research questions that we come up with are deep and substantive problems that really are important for mankind to solve. How to do that is really a challenging task, and one that we do all the time in every single study. What are research questions? Research questions are really the fundamental cornerstone around which your entire scientific research endeavor revolves and evolves. They're both the starting point and the end point for any scientific project. Any one study sets out to answer one particular research question that frames the problem or phenomenon that the study is about. And of course, it's the end point of the study, because once we find an answer through scientific research, we go back to the research question to determine whether we have sufficiently comprehensively answered it and what other questions might in turn open up because of the answer we have provided it. So it is both the starting point to understand what the study is about, and of course it's the end point because it gives us closure to say how well and how comprehensively and how sufficiently we may have answered a question that we set out to answer. Moreover, it is also an important framing device that allows not only you, but also those around you, your advisors, your team, other stakeholders, your friends and family, but also external examiners, reviewers, sponsors of the research, funding bodies, university administration, or anyone else to understand what you are doing and where your expertise is, by understanding what sort of problems you are trying to solve, what sort of research questions you are asking in the scientific endeavors that you are. So a research question provides a frame that brackets the entire investigation, as well as its representation in the final research report or outcome, such as your thesis, a paper, a book, or a report to a company. Let me start by describing several problems that are commonly found when you listen to people describing the research question. One problem that is commonly found is called the elevator speech problem. That is that people cannot tell what research questions they are, answering or try to answer unless they engage in a 5-minute monologue. It's called an elevator speech problem because the metaphor says that, imagine you go up into an elevator and with you goes a very important person into that elevator. That could be someone that you always wanted to talk to about your research. It could be a sponsor of your research. It could be the CEO of a company or anyone else that you think might be interested in your research question. Well, in the elevator scenario, you have about 20 seconds to leave an impression on the person that you're trying to impress with the research question. And if you cannot tell succinctly in 20 seconds what your research is about, the person will have left the elevator. There are variants of this. For example, several universities do what are called 3-minute thesis competitions. So competitions where students are asked to explain what their research is about, what the question is, what the study design is, and what answers they have found within 3 minutes, to be succinct and clear. The idea behind that is that if you cannot tell what the research question is that you're answering in a very succinct and clear way within a few seconds, you probably haven't understood it or defined it well enough. Another common problem is called the so what problem. There is a research question, but it doesn't matter to anyone. It is not relevant to any problem that is of sufficient magnitude or substantiveness. This is important in information system because it is an applied discipline. We're not a fundamental discipline. We don't look at the nature of molecules or the nature of the universe or some basic characteristics of living beings or anything like this. Our research is applied. It typically looks at problems that some entity in the real world, a firm, an individual, society, some other collective, has in dealing with technology. And these problems must be real and they must be important. They matter to some important audience. And that makes them worth an opening. And if you have a research question where we cannot answer the so what if you answer it, then it says that the research question isn't relevant enough. A third common problem is the solving the world problem. There is indeed an important research question, but it cannot be answered given the resource constraint that students typically have. So, for example, during your bachelor, master's, or even PhD thesis, your resource constraints means it's basically only you. And you also have time constraints. Yeah, in a bachelor thesis, you have about 6 to 12 weeks. In a master thesis, you may have half a year, and in a PhD study program, you have about 2 to 3 years, depending on regulations and the training you need. And that is the amount of time or resources you have available to answer the question, irrespective of how important that is. To give you one example, an important research question would be to figure out whether early exposure to digital technologies in babies has a positive or negative impact on their life, in the long run. So whether or not I should allow babies to play around with the iPad or whether I should ban them from internet and media and these sorts of things until they're adolescents. To figure out an answer to that question, we would have to study a whole bunch of babies, of course, but we would also have to wait 10, 20, 30, 40 years to see what becomes of their life, what the trajectory of their life will be. That is a very important question, a very relevant question, but it's not one that could be answered by research students within the constraints of their degrees. Another type of common problem is an insolvability problem. There is a research question, but it cannot be answered meaningfully, maybe because of a logical problem in the question, because the information we need to answer the question cannot be legally or ethically or legally be obtained, or the answer is so hard to obtain that it's not feasible to do this within the constraints that we have. Just to give you one, I guess, mild example for this, imagine you want to do research on strategic technology decision making within the firms. To answer this, you would have to speak to C-level executives, CIOs, CEOs. And to do this meaningfully, you probably have to get access to a few hundred of them. That is extremely difficult to do. These people are very hard to reach. They're very busy, and they don't have a lot of time for research, let alone for research by some 20-year-old, student. So that is not insolvable per se, but it's not very feasible to solve within the typical constraints that we have. Finally, a problem is that people very simply are asking too many questions. And in turn, most of these questions are either too narrow, too irrelevant, or otherwise deficient. A good study sets out to answer one question, and a good thesis answers one question, maybe two. Yeah, for some reason, many students think they have to have at least 3 research questions or, even up to 6 or something like this. And that is not good practice because all you need to do is answer one question. And maybe in a very grand thesis that has multiple studies in them, you can answer 2 or 3 questions, but you can't gain anything by answering 6 questions. So these are common problems that are often occur when people specify research questions, and you can sort of put them into different categories of improper research questions. One type of bad research question is an obvious question. Are there challenges in using IT? Sure, of course there are. Obvious questions have answers to which everyone would agree. The question could be irrelevant. Is there an influence of weather on the salaries of technology professionals? there is no reason to believe that there is any influence whatsoever. So not any association or potential relationship is relevant to examine. There could also be absurd question. Is the earth flat after all? Absurd questions are questions where we know what the answer is, and the answer is, to the answers everyone would disagree with. It's an absurd question to ask and therefore also irrelevant. What is also often the case is that people ask definitional questions. Is technology conflict characterized by disagreement? Well, that depends. If you say it is, if you define it in a way that it's characterized by disagreement, then yes. And if you define it in a way that has nothing to do with disagreement, then no. A definitional question is a form of description. It's not a research question. It's just a matter of how you choose to define and operationalize a particular concept in your own research. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a statement. Finally, there could be affirmation questions. And these very often are questions that start with a can. Can a tool be developed to do something? Sure. Why not? In principle, there's no reason to believe that it cannot be done. So a can question very often has the answer, yes, sure, most certainly, right? How it is being developed, or how good it will be, or how effective or useful, these are very different types of questions. But can it be developed? I sure hope it can. Now, these are all elements of basically of things what not to do. We can now turn our attention to how to find a research question, how to specify it appropriately. And one way to think about it is to ask a research question as the logical, necessary, and inevitable conclusion to a set of arguments. And these arguments basically stress three things. First of all, there is an important problem domain. This could be technology in healthcare. That is a broad field that is important. It could be the use of technology by adolescents or kids or babies. That is also important. It could be the use of technology by students. It could be the use of technology by firms. All of these are important domains where it's easy to stress that this is relevant to the economy, to the function of the society, or to other aspects of the human existence. And in this broad problem domains, there's a particular important phenomenon in that domain that deserves attention from the research community. For example, the fact that ChatGPT is available and students can use it both to improve their learning and to cheat examination. Or that generative AI is available to firms that they can exploit for positive effects or for anti-competitive behavior. These are important phenomena that are dealing with. Or social media that has the benefits of staying in touch and getting information, but at the same time there are fake news and potential mental and physical health effects of these types of technologies for adolescent human beings. These are all important specific phenomena in a particular domain that deserve attention because the answer to such a question matter. But that's not enough. This third part, which must also be given, is that for this phenomena in that domain, there is a deficiency with the available knowledge about this type of development. So not only is there a domain that's important with a particular phenomenon that is, non-trivial, relevant, and where the answer would matter to humankind, but also that whatever we already know about this or related things is deficient. It cannot answer this. Maybe because there is no knowledge available. Maybe because there is knowledge, but it cannot apply to that. Maybe there are multiple answers and they are inconsistent with one another. In one way or another, there must be deficiency with the available knowledge. Let me give you an example for this. The example is taken from a paper by Ron Centefali and his colleague, and it's a bit older, and it looked at the inhibitors of technology usage intention. So the question of why people would reject technology instead of accepting it. And the way, when you read the first page of this article, literally the first page, you can see that they very nicely build up an argument to motivate their research question. And the argument goes like this. Organizations invest heavily in new IT and they see benefits from these investments. Yeah, think of a company that spends literally hundreds of millions of dollars in getting the new Microsoft Office suite. And they do this because they believe that at some stage they will get operational efficiency gains that, makes this investment worthwhile. The problem is that sometimes these benefits don't materialize because employees never use these technologies. So again, imagine an organization that spends $100 million on an installation of Microsoft Office, but everyone continues to use Gmail or other types of technology for this purpose, and they never use the technology, so the company never gets the benefits that would justify the $100 million investment. That's a problem, because in this particular case, it's an economic problem in that, the companies lose money. This is a particular phenomenon. People sometimes do not use technologies, and it's an important problem or important phenomenon because these technologies cost a lot of money. Now, there's also a problem with the literature. The deficiency is that the literature to date has studied why people would choose to accept technologies, but not exclusively why would they choose to reject a technology. And we know from other phenomena, for example, smoking, that the reasons why people do something are very different from the reason they may have for not doing something. So, for example, in the smoking setting, we know that a factor such as social pressure leads people to start smoking. Yeah, so, all your buddies smoke and they go outside and share a cigarette and you're left out. And that sometimes can be an inclination for people to also start smoking because of social pressure. But the absence of social pressure is not a reason why people do not smoke. Yeah, so the presence of the factor leading to acceptance does not guarantee that the absence of the factor lead to rejection. We know this from general social phenomena. We don't know about what that looks like for technology. And that's a problem because, of the economic costs involved in such a decision. And therefore, Ron Centofanti and his colleague ask an important relevant research question is, why do people reject new information technology? And that is what that paper set out to answer. So, in general, when you do specify such a research question, very basically, you can distinguish two types of different research questions based on the issues they address. We call them type 1 and type 2 research questions. Type 1 questions are very often what, who, and where type of questions. They focus on phenomena we wish to explore and describe because little knowledge exists about them. Who's using ChatGPT? What are they doing it? Where are firms using it? For what purpose? These are all questions that focus on exploring the state of adoption and describing what firms are doing. Different to those are the so-called type 2 questions, which are very often how and why questions. They are not descriptive, they are explanatory. They seek to answer questions about the causal mechanisms that are at work in a particular phenomenon. So asking what companies are doing with ChatGPT is very different from asking why are they using ChatGPT or how exactly are they using ChatGPT in their business processes. The how and why are explanatory. We're trying to understand cause and effect relationship. What, who, where, how much, and so forth are descriptive questions. We're trying to assess state to describe the characteristics of a phenomenon, such as its adoption or diffusion. So type 1 questions try to learn about what the situation of a phenomenon looks like. We often ask these questions about phenomena that are emergent, so that are new to the world. To give you one example, when the COVID pandemic broke out, we realized that there was a new virus, and our first step was to understand as much as possible about it. What does it look like? What is its genetic structure? What does it do? Where does it occur? How does it, who can be affected by it, and so forth. So the first step was really to explore and describe everything around the virus as much possible. Then we move to type 2 questions. Type 2 questions seeks to explain the cause and effect mechanisms behind why and how something works. So in the setting of that pandemic, at some stage, we wanted to find out how the virus infects people. What are the infections mechanisms? Why did we want to do this? We wanted to devise interventions and treatments, vaccination, medication, or social distancing rules, stuff like this, that hinder these mechanisms by which the virus infects people and leads to, disease and death. So this is a how and why question. One important relationship between type 1 and type 2 question is that type 2 questions very often temporarily succeed type 1 questions, so we ask them later. And the reason is that it's difficult to explain a phenomenon without first systematically exploring and describing it. So, for example, the DNA double helix that we talked about at some stage is an attempt to describe the structure of the human genome. Now that we've understand this, now that we answered this type 1 question, what is the structure of the human genome, we can now move into understanding how does it work and how could we modify it. So genetic engineering, replacing one genome element in that structure and replacing with another and seeing what consequences that would bring, is only possible because we first had found a way of describing it, and then figuring out a way of explaining how that structure operates. In reflecting about a research question, it's worth to consider a few principles that describe characteristics for why a research question would be of high quality. First, the research question should be feasible, meaning that data will be available to answer it, the expertise in doing this study is available, and there's expertise available to help you through your advisory or supervisors or mentors. You have time and money available when needed, and overall the scope is manageable within the constraints that are presented to you, for example, during your bachelor thesis, master thesis, your research degree, or even later on. Nothing is gained by not being able to answer a research question. It doesn't matter how important it is. Second, the research question should also be interesting to you, meaning that you are confident that you can maintain an interest, maintain your motivation and ambition to pursue the question for several years or whatever time frame you have available. That might not be that important to a 12-week bachelor thesis. It becomes more important to a master thesis project that's several months long, or of course doing your PhD when you have several years for completing a particular study. If you lose the interest in pursuing the answer, no one will be interested in hearing about the results. Third, the research question should be novel, meaning that we will find an original answer, an original contribution to knowledge. The reason for that is that what science endeavors to do is to add and accumulate more knowledge for humankind. And we can only do this by asking new questions and finding new answers that extend or refute previous findings. Nothing is to be gained by asking the same questions and getting the same over again, because we will not add to the body of knowledge we already have. Fourth, the research question should be ethical, meaning that pursuing and answering the question will not put the safety of investigators or the subject at risk, and you will not be violating any moral or ethical principles or legal principles for interaction or, of course, for the conduct of science. Finally, your research question should be relevant, meaning that both the question and the answer are important to stakeholders in the sense they inform them. Either the scientific community, because you're yielding new scientific knowledge or new theories, or to industry practice, because the answer is relevant to the decision-making of some important stakeholders, and of course, future research direction for other people. And ideally, really, your research question and the answer it provides are relevant to academics as well as industry practitioners. That brings us to the end of this video lecture, in which we covered 3 areas: common problems with research questions, the difference between type 1 and type 2 research questions, and 5 characteristics of high quality research questions. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching.